what if the path of global superpowers and potentially, your own financial future was following a clear, repeatable pattern, like something set up over the last 500 years?
That's exactly the question, isn't it? It's the core insight behind Ray Dalio's work on the changing world order.
Right.
So today, our mission is really to unpack that. We're looking at his analysis of the rise and fall of big empires, think the Dutch, the British, the U.S., and seeing how those patterns might apply now, especially with current conflicts, economic stuff.
Okay, so it's about using history to maybe get a glimpse of the future, not just looking back for its own sake.
Precisely. The sources talk about this big cycle. It's this fundamental pattern.
So what drives this cycle? What are the main components?
Yeah. Okay, so think of it like an operating system for an empire. Dalio identifies 5 big interconnected forces. It helps to think of them maybe in 2 buckets: what's happening inside the empire and the pressures from outside.
All right, let's start inside. What are those internal pressures?
Okay, internally, you've got 2 big ones. First, there's the whole debt and money creation thing, central banks printing money, credit bubbles forming, that whole mechanism. And second, often tied to that first one, is internal conflict. This is about the growing gaps, wealth gaps, opportunity gaps, even values. You see it in political polarization.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
The money stuff fuels the social tension. Okay, so what about the external pressures?
Externally, there's the classic one, geopolitical conflict, that tension between the rising power and the current dominant one.
Right.
Then number 4 is acts of nature. Things like pandemics, maybe big climate events. They don't cause the decline usually, but they can definitely accelerate existing problems.
Like a catalyst.
Exactly. And the 5th one, really important, is human ingenuity and technology. That's the engine of progress, but also determines, who wins the next big conflict.
So putting this all together, the relevance for you listening right now, it seems pretty clear. We're trying to figure out how to navigate what might be coming by looking at these patterns, especially what happens when big powers start running out of money and what you might be able to do to protect yourself financially.
Exactly. So Dalio, when he studied these 10 empires over 500 years, he wasn't just observing, he was measuring their power. He uses this analogy.
Yes, the analogy.
Yeah. He says the big cycle is kind of like a person's life. Birth, growing strong, maturity, then eventually weakness and decline. That whole power cycle for a dominant nation, it averages around 80 years or so. But the bigger shift, the whole world order changing, that's more like 250 years.
And the sources really hammer home that this handover isn't smooth, is it? Those 250-year transitions, usually lots of conflict.
Oh, absolutely. Leading powers don't just fade away quietly. They fight to hold on.
So how does Dalio measure this? You said he quantifies power.
Yeah, he tracks 8 key metrics, kind of like vital signs for an empire, things you'd expect, like education levels, innovation, economic output.
Yeah.
But the ones that really signal a potential shift, those are tied more to finance and hard power. So military strength, how powerful its financial center is, and maybe the most critical one, whether it has the world's reserve currency.
Right, the exorbitant privilege. You flagged that as really key. Let's break that down. Why is having the reserve currency like the U.S. dollar has been so important, and maybe how does it sow the seeds of decline?
Okay, the exorbitant privilege. It's this massive built-in advantage for the country whose money everyone else uses for trade and savings. It means that empire can basically print money to buy stuff from the rest of the world. And crucially, it lets them borrow way more than anyone else because everyone else needs their currency for trade and they want to save in it. So they lend their money back to that empire, buying its bonds.
So the world is basically funding the dominant power's spending habits, letting it spend more than it earns. That sounds great in the short term.
It is a huge boost, but it creates distortions, right? It can make the country less focused on actually making things, producing goods domestically, and more focused on finance. Why bother building a factory if you can just print the money to buy the goods or lend money out?
I see.
So it fuels overconsumption, helps pay for expensive wars, and kind of masks maybe an underlying decay in real productivity. And that leads to massive debt, big trade deficits, and eventually you get these financial bubbles. That's the seed of the decline planted by the privilege itself.
That decay you mentioned, it perfectly sets up this template for the modern money debt crisis. Let's talk about 1971. The U.S. effectively defaulted then, didn't it? Can we simplify what happened?
Yeah, we can use another analogy here. Think back, especially under the Bretton Woods system after World War II. Gold was kind of the real money for international stuff. The U.S. dollar, the paper money, was more like a check in a checkbook.
Oh, well.
It was only valuable because the U.S. promised you could swap it for a fixed amount of gold anytime, like cashing the check.
But the U.S. was spending massively, right? Vietnam War, social programs, they were writing way more of these dollar checks than they actually had gold in the bank account to cover.
Exactly right. And other countries, particularly France, started getting nervous. They started showing up saying, okay, we'll take the gold now, please. And they started draining the U.S. gold reserves fast.
So Nixon had to do something.
He did. He went on TV and basically said, sorry, the gold window is closed. We're breaking the promise. We won't exchange dollars for gold anymore. From a historical view, yeah, that was a default on that promise.
Okay, but it stopped the immediate crisis, stopped the run on gold. So why is breaking that link, going off gold, seen as such a negative sign in this long-term cycle?
Because it removes the main discipline on government spending and money printing. Once you break that link, there's theoretically no limit. The government can just print money to pay its bills, spend more than it earns, kind of indefinitely. Yeah. And that's the core mechanism Dalio points to again and again. Printing money without a matching increase in real goods and services. It just devalues the money you already have. It doesn't fix the debt. It just waters down the currency, pushing up the prices of assets, stocks, property, gold, commodities, inflation.
So it looks like you're solving a debt crisis, but you're actually just creating inflation that hurts regular people.
Precisely. And who benefits most from that asset inflation? People who already own those assets. Who gets hurt? People relying on wages or holding cash savings. It makes inequality worse.
And we saw this playbook run again, didn't we? 2008, the big financial crisis.
Yep. Massive money printing, bailouts.
And then again in 2020 with the pandemic response.
Exactly the same principle. And Dalio basically says, look, it'll almost certainly happen in the future, too. The U.S. today has enormous debt, keeps spending more than it takes in, and it finances this by borrowing and, yes, printing vast amounts of new money via the Fed. The big reckoning, the big sell-off of the dollar hasn't really hit yet, but the conditions are there.
And that worsening inequality you mentioned directly feeds into the next major force, doesn't it? The internal conflict piece.
It absolutely does. We're seeing this critical point where, according to Dalio's model, 3 big signs of decline are happening at the same time. We've covered the first. The country's basically out of money and printing to cover debts. Now, let's hit that second one. The massive internal conflict.
Which seems maybe the most dangerous.
It's incredibly dangerous, maybe underappreciated. When you have monetary policy that pumps up assets, the wealth gap just explodes.
Right.
And that breeds deep division, polarization, populism. You see it right. The sources talk about the left wanting redistribution, taxing the rich, and the right wanting to defend wealth, push back on social changes.
And everyone's just shouting past each other.
Exactly. There's no agreement on how to even govern, let alone share the pie or fix the underlying problems. It paralyzes the country.
And that internal weakness makes the country more vulnerable just when it's facing that third factor, rising external conflict, specifically the U.S. versus China.
Right. History shows when you get this rising power challenging the dominant one, the conflict tends to follow a pattern, like escalating stages. Dalio calls them the 5 wars.
Okay, what are they?
It usually starts with 1, a trade war. We've seen that. Then it escalates to 2, a technology war. Think semiconductors, AI. That's definitely happening.
For sure.
Then comes 3, a geopolitical influence war, competing for allies, influence in different regions. After that, 4, capital and economic warfare. We are deep in that now, right?
Right.
Sanctions, freezing assets, trying to weaponize the dollar system itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the final, most dangerous stage, obviously, is 5, military war, hot war.
And if you look around the world now, you can almost see these alliances shifting, can't you?
Yeah.
The sources mention China, Russia, India, Kazakhstan, kind of aligning, maybe looking for alternatives to the U.S.-led system.
Yeah, it's a clear signal, a move away from what they might see as a U.S.-manipulated economic order. It's a direct challenge to the dollar's dominance. Look at China. They've massively increased their gold reserves since 2008. They're buying gold, making deals in their own currency, building alliances.
They're preparing.
Actively preparing for a different kind of world order, one less centered on the U.S. dollar.
But going back to those 5 wars, the sources seem to really emphasize the technology war. Like, that's the one that really matters.
It's seen as potentially decisive, yeah. The thinking is, Whoever wins the tech race in AI, quantum computing, biotech, whatever comes next, likely gains an edge in all the other conflicts, economic and geopolitical. The US and China are locked in that race. Others, like, say, the UK,
Sure.
maybe not so much in the game at that top level anymore.
Hmm. And this all sounds pretty deterministic, like a script playing out. But there was a contrarian take mentioned in the sources, right, from Dalio himself.
Yes, and this is crucial. While the historical template is really compelling, Dalio is clear. Decline isn't inevitable. It's not absolutely predetermined. He uses that life cycle analogy. Again, think of someone who gets a bad diagnosis, but then radically changes their lifestyle, gets healthy, and lives much longer.
So a country can extend its cycle.
Potentially, yes. If the people in charge really pay attention to those vital signs we talked about, the debt, the internal conflict, the competitiveness, and if they make strong, sometimes difficult policy choices, human ingenuity, that fifth force, or just smart, conscious decisions could change the trajectory. It's not easy, but the future isn't just fate. It needs managing.
That's a really important counterpoint. It's not just about passively watching decline. So let's bring this down to the individual level. If the future requires active management nationally and personally, what should you, the listener, be thinking about? How do you safeguard your future in this kind of shifting world order?
Well, when things get unstable globally, the single most valuable thing you can have is flexibility, adaptability. There's a great Hong Kong saying used as a metaphor in the source.
Ah, the metaphor.
Yeah, a smart rabbit has 3 holes.
Meaning,
Meaning you need options. You need the ability to move your money, your capital, if things get bad in one place. And, maybe even more importantly, the ability to move yourself, physically relocate, immigrate to places that are safer, more stable, offer better opportunities.
like away from places that are becoming, well, terrible.
Exactly. And this really challenges some standard financial advice, doesn't it? Like, the #1 goal is usually buy a house.
Yeah, own your home.
But a house is a massive, illiquid asset. It ties up a huge amount of your capital and roots you to one spot. In times of major world change, that lack of flexibility could be a real liability. Being able to sell quickly and move might be far more valuable. It's tough mentally, giving up that dream, but agility is key during these shifts.
Okay, so flexibility is paramount, tactically. But stepping back, what about the fundamentals? What are the absolute basic things needed to reverse decline, whether it's for a whole country or just, your own personal situation?
It really boils down to 2 incredibly simple, almost old-fashioned principles that come up in the source material. First, earn more than you spend. Seems obvious, right? But it applies to a nation's budget just as much as your household budget. Stop running deficits.
Okay, number 1, live within your means. What's number 2?
Number 2, treat each other well. This sounds maybe soft, but it's about the social fabric. Strong character, civility, working together productively, rule of law, all those complex metrics Dalio tracks are really just outcomes reflecting whether a society can do these 2 basic things.
Earn more than you spend and treat each other well. Simple, but hard.
Very hard, especially when internal conflict is high.
Okay, final point. Against this backdrop, money printing, geopolitical tensions, potential system change, we have to talk about alternatives. Bitcoin comes up as a potential hedge. Why is it seen that way in this context?
Well, the interesting perspective here is that Bitcoin is seen by some as potentially the only major asset that exists truly outside the traditional system. It's not controlled by any single government, not the US, not China. It can't be arbitrarily printed or debased like fiat currencies.
So it's a hedge against inflation and government action.
Exactly. It's seen as a hedge against that currency debasement we talked about, caused by all the money printing, and potentially also a hedge against, well, more dystopian futures involving things like government-controlled digital currencies or digital ID systems. The idea is it could be a form of global neutral money that holds value regardless of which superpower is on top or what the financial system looks like.
Fascinating. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We went through Dalio's big cycle, the forces driving it, that 1971 checkbook analogy.
Right, the exorbitant privilege, the current convergence of debt, internal conflict, external conflict.
And the need for flexibility. The smart rabbit needing those 3 holes and those core principles.
Yeah, earn more, treat each other well, and the potential role of things like Bitcoin.
So let's leave our listeners with a final thought, something to chew on.
Okay, how about this? Maybe the greatest war any nation faces isn't external, but internal. It's the war with itself, whether it has the discipline, the unity, the political will to make the tough choices needed to stay successful. And looking even further ahead, think about AI and robotics. Their rise presents a totally new historical challenge.
How so?
Well, for 500 years, progress often involved leveraging human labor. But what happens if AI and automation make most human labor unnecessary? While intelligence drives progress, we might face a future where there just aren't enough jobs, traditionally speaking. That forces a huge question. How does society ensure everyone can be productive and prosperous when machines do most of the work? That's a world order change beyond anything Dalio studied in the last 500 years.
Wow. Okay, that is definitely something to think about. A future challenge layered on top of the historical cycles.
Indeed.
All right. Well, if you found this deep dive useful, please do follow, like, and share it. It really helps. And for more analysis like this on the financial world and beyond, make sure you're following What Bitcoin Taught Me. You can find us on Twitter, X, No Scare, Blue Ski, Threads, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Thanks for tuning in.